You host the solution in the cloud. The cloud is the Microsoft Cloud, Azure, hosting the solution. That's where the problem is. It's not with SAAQclic, it's with Microsoft.
What the lamest excuse I've ever heard, I think. That is from, what's his name? Gilles Bélanger on SAAQclic, which again is down today. You can't get anything done unless you're going for an actual physical driver's test. Jim, have you heard a lamer excuse than it's not us, it's Microsoft ever?
Hey, listen, the good news is he did not with a straight face say, listen, we're going to try to turn it off and turn it back on again, okay? Because, but this is the thing. We're chuckling away. Yes, this is the same SAAQclic that, the whole process of putting it online just went $500 million over budget. Who cares about that? A lot of people care about that. It's really got the government by the throat. And the last thing they needed right now was having problems again with SAAQclic. In fact, let's be fair here. SAAQclic is working. You just can't access it because the site's down. Because why? Well, apparently, as we just heard M. Bélanger say, there's a problem with a bank of servers that are essentially linking up various functions with the cloud. And for those of our listeners who don't know what the cloud is something, a big white thing you see in the sky, but it's also it's almost like this kind of Indiana Jones, memory bank computers that Microsoft has, so you don't have to clog up your computer with all kinds of megabytes of stuff. You can put it on the cloud, you have your account, and everything's supposed to be cool. So now they're blaming Microsoft, whatever the case may be. And I say, Aaron, this is very, very important because, the credibility of the government to provide services is going to be shot. I'm sorry, that train has already left the station. Nobody trusts the Legault government to get anything right, unless, of course, it's maybe like language raids on some mom and pop operation. But apart from that, they can't even do the simplest things. We're not talking, to a certain extent, thank God, we're not talking about, booking major surgery, but it is getting your license. It's a vehicle licensing bureau. It is a fundamental service offered by the government, and they have been banging their heads against the wall since last February on this entire process. And the idea that, never mind an inquiry, which is going on to say what happened with the cost overruns, this fiasco, this administrative fiasco, in and of itself is worthy of an investigation. Will we get to the bottom of it? Probably not. Remember, we have an election a year from October, and at that point, I suspect there'll be other things on the agenda. But my God, talk about a government that, if it tried to, metaphorically speaking, if it tried to tie its shoelaces, it would fall over. And this is being proved day after day after day. And the only sort of like breakthroughs we see, I don't know if you saw our story today with Phil Ote at MontrealGazette.com. We've got, Robert, the language minister, saying, yeah, it was a bit of a mistake, trying to ban the Go Habs Go. This is where we are. But fundamental stuff, they can't do it. And you know what, folks? I'm sorry. I wish there was a rescue on its way. No, we're going to have to put up with this for at least a year, and then who knows, maybe even longer, depending on who we vote into office next October. But the bottom line here is things simply go from bad to worse, and we remain handcuffed to a government which, above and beyond everything else, above and beyond all the problems that I have with it, simply doesn't know how to do anything whatsoever.
So a couple of things. I just want to go back. I made a phone call immediately after I heard that clip that we played, and I called Bill Gates because apparently he knows some people at Microsoft, so they're going to see if they can fix that up. Why not rename it SAAQclic? It's closer to what it actually is, and I hope they realize that. But what do you make of? I heard Marc Tanguay again calling for Geneviève Guilbeault and saying, "Hey, where's the accountability here?" And I know there's a commission now looking into this, but what do you think? Is it time for someone to go?
Listen, the idea of ministerial accountability is how can I put it? It's simply become quaint. It wasn't that long ago. I've been in this line of work for 4 decades, but when I started, certainly up until the midpoint of my career, maybe 2/3 into it, if your ministry screwed up, it didn't matter if it was the cloud, Aaron. It didn't matter if Bill Gates was looking out the window at the wrong time. You stepped down. You had to resign. It was a tradition, and perhaps that's why the CAQ gets maybe tastes vomit at the back of its throat when you mention this to them. It's part of the English parliamentary tradition. It is a matter of ministerial responsibility. That if something goes wrong on your watch, you're the one who takes the fall. That is completely non-existent. In fact, if you're a friend of Francois Legault, he will fight tooth and nail to keep you where you are, i.e., and I cite the example of a guy named Pierre Fitzgibbon, who let's say had a rather casual relationship with the National Assembly's Code of Ethics, and who was defended tooth and nail by the Premier until he himself, Fitzgibbon himself, had said, you know what, I don't want to play anymore, and left for the private sector. So sorry, folks, I know if you're thinking, heads will roll. There ain't no heads are going to roll. The only thing that's going to roll are your tax dollars into more, half thought out, half baked attempts to make good this ridiculous system that clearly was poorly planned, badly executed, and now will probably be covered up left, right, and center because God knows we've got bigger things to worry about than fundamental government services being offered to the public.
Jim, while we're done with SAAQclic for just a second, can I move on? Tell me what you think about this Premier Legault now picking a fight with doctors. You think of all the people you don't want to start with, they'd be at the bottom of your list?
Given what I just said in terms of the Legault government's inability to do anything, they're going to turn around now and say, yeah, we're going to assess the work that doctors are doing. We're going to assess, whether or not, we should be paying them, whether they're, checking off the boxes on our quotas, right? Because let's face it, healthcare is pretty much like counting widgets, isn't it, Aaron? So, on top of everything, I'm not even talking about the usual talking heads we're going to be hearing from on this controversy. I'm talking about the X number of doctors who maybe were thinking about setting up practice in Quebec, and now that is the last thing on their mind. And for Francois freaking Legault to turn around and say, I will not rest until everyone has a family doctor. I've been on the list for 2 years, okay? Thank you very much. I'm sure the check is in the mail. The call will be coming any time now about maybe it's being routed through SAAQclic. Who knows? But I'm not holding my breath, buddy.
But he goes on to say it's going to be, it's going to be a rough ride, but we're not going to back down.
Of course not. He needs to fight. Aaron, I've said this a zillion times. Yeah. Whether it's immigrants, whether it's Anglos, whether it's people who don't look like Francois Legault, now it's doctors. He has to have an adversary. In that regard, he is exactly like Donald freaking Trump, okay? He needs a fight because when he's in the middle of a fight, you don't recognize how absolutely, utterly incompetent he and his coterie of cabinet ministers are, in fact.
I want to just get to one last thing, which, it's not on the list, but I wanted to bring it up. I mentioned when we were talking to Maya before, I happened to see Gérald Tremblay last night at the Frank Zampino trial.
Yeah.
And he seemed really, now it's been a while, right? It's been years. So here's the ex-mayor of Montreal who was embroiled, and I say he was embroiled, although he seems to suggest I had nothing to do. I didn't know, any of this. And he kind of went out of his way yesterday while being interviewed, I guess, after he'd finished testifying, saying that, and I think his line was, look, 3% of the money or whatever it happens to be, where is that money? And I didn't do anything and I had nothing to do with it, but, you've kind of made me seem like I'm the guilty party here. What did you make of that?
Well, remember, and I covered Gérald Tremblay for, 12 years, whatever, and he was, up until he was kind of like, railroaded out of office by Pauline Marois and our good friend Jean-François Lisée, who publicly said perhaps he should think about his political future. I remember at one point when this controversy was at its height, and the Tremblay administration or Union Montreal were buying spots on CJAD with Gérald Tremblay saying, I didn't know what was going on. I wasn't being willfully blind. Do you expect me to know everything that's going on? And I thought that was a bit weird because generally I always had the impression that, he could have been, I always had the impression he was a good mayor. I always thought he could have been a great mayor, but let's face it, we're discovering that a lot of the entourage, there were some very deep built-in flaws there. And now I think, to a certain extent, his legacy is to perpetually explain himself, which I think is a bit unfair. Because in the end, I think he did believe in the product. He did believe in Montreal. But, that's the way things are. The other thing I would mention en passant is we're talking about ancient history. My God, it took a long time for this case to finally get in front of a judge.
It's still going on. It's not even necessarily over. You're right.
Yeah.
You kind of wonder, justice denied. What is it? What's that expression?
There were people who got sick and all kinds of delays and this and that. But it's turning into a regular example of a kind of a bleak house situation there. And in the end, I would respectfully submit that most of the listeners now who are hearing reports on this trial don't even know who the principals are.
So when you say Mr. 3%, that doesn't mean anything.
There you
go. James Mennie at the Montreal Gazette. Thank you, Jim.
Demain.